to Joey directly or any witnesses,
Correct.
even if their accounts differ, right? No witnesses.
Yep.
So to me, as a quasi-judicial document, it seemed terribly flawed. And my comments that morning were, you know, it's not about Joey. He had lots of choices. It's not about Lloyd because, you know, I've always been pretty, I think, complimentary to Lloyd as a councillor. It's about this report. How can we accept any findings out of a report that seems so obviously incomplete and unprofessional? And might I say, the findings of the report that Lloyd had in fact broken the code of conduct, but no sanctions or anything were recommended. So my concern was this report doesn't seem good enough for council to receive it, but as you know, Lord, you can pick up the story, Lauren, council did receive it without comment, except for Matt Green, who said the report seemed incomplete, voted against that, and Scott Duval, who said we can't have a recommendation against a councillor who admitted to a code of conduct breach but has no consequences, because city staff people would not have that luxury. If they admitted to a code of conduct breach, they'd have some sort of, you know, sanction or something against them. So Scott Duval couldn't vote for it in that regard.
So my understanding is that when council received it, it's an issue, like the receiving of it is to be minute of it that it exists. And that doesn't mean by putting your hand up that you like it, that you support it, or otherwise. So it's more, because it's a third-party agency and a third-party person, it can't be kicked back. That's not how the deal is.
Right.
However, councillors can certainly comment on it, but the receiving of it needs to be separated from the endorsing of it.
And that's a really important point, because a couple of councillors did speak to it at the moment of reception, right? And so what that did really is it separated council in a way that I think has had them all scrambling for the last 4 days. I mean, it's been pretty intense, because what it said was, if the process argument is just they were just receiving it, they weren't endorsing it, it was just process based on a staff recommendation, then why did these two councillors speak out of conscience against receiving the report? It seemed as though there was an opportunity there for other councillors who may have had issue to say something. Now, it's entirely possible, Lauren, that they didn't realize their colleagues would take that opportunity and they were thinking they might speak to it at a later time. I don't know, I'm not in council's head. But what happened as a result of council receiving it mostly silently, because the report had some real issues in it, it caused people to say, hold on a second. You know, I think the public not knowing that council may take some other recourse at a later date, it seemed like, wait, so a report on something that's serious, I mean, it was a code of conduct breach, it was a grabbing and shoving someone, which is never okay. People call that bullying, it's not right. So here people thought, well, is council, is our city leadership essentially saying, okay, we'll accept this and the fact that there's no sanctions on that breach of code of conduct, and therefore, and I've said this, are they sending a message that says city staff and councillors have a double standard? Council can get away with something, staff can't. Is it sending a message out there to taxpayers that council will receive an unprofessional, incomplete report and pay for it? And is it sending a message to kids that, you know, if you kind of call out a bully and they admit it, there's no punishment? So the problem, I think, Lauren, is that people felt that the silence around receiving it was an endorsement. Don't you think? That's what people were so upset about.
So I think it's universal that the report is flawed. It seemed poorly written. It seemed lazily investigated. And I think there's consensus on that.
Well, the ombudsman weighed in. The provincial ombudsman went crazy, right? I mean, crazy respectfully. But he trashed it. He said he would have sent it back if he were in charge.
And he's not, and he didn't see the videotape, and he didn't interview two. So it's a little bit weird that he's got such big opinions, either, you know, investigated or not.
Well, he will have jurisdiction, though, on municipalities very soon. That's the legislation.
Right, but not in regards to this issue.
No, he can't go retroactively. But I think it's not surprising when Hamiltonians, myself included, said, listen, we have this turkey of a report. We need eyes to look at it that have some experience, and he was willing to do that.
But Earl Basse is not just Hamilton's fly-by-night Integrity Commissioner. He's been Integrity Commissioner elsewhere. He allegedly was qualified for the job as council gave him the job. And this is where it gets weird, Laura. Council brought in the Integrity Commissioner 2 elections ago. It was a major pillar of Mayor Fred, first time around, of his campaign promises, to provide oversight on them. So they don't like this. It's more than a little bit weird.
It's a mess.
They hired the guy to police them, and they don't like his decision. Well, how can you flip that around? You can not renew his contract and all that kind of thing, but they've put him on that pedestal, given him that authority, and just because they don't like what he has to say, how do you switch that?
And from the cacophony of legal opinions I've received on this in the last 3 days, I think the consensus is that to rescind the report after having received it would be legally messy. And given, as you said, this binding thing on the integrity, I mean, the whole thing, I don't know that at this stage that can change, and going forward,